Now recording. Where the script go? Here we go. Okay, this is Mickey Rowland, Chair of the Historic Structures Advisory Board. Permit me to confirm that all members and persons anticipated on the agenda are present and can hear me. Lucy?
Yes.
Angus?
Here.
And Jason?
Yes.
And there is no staff anymore today anyway, so no one's going to answer that. And no anticipated speakers. This open meeting of the HSAB is being conducted remotely, consistent with Governor Baker's executive order of March 12, 2020, due to the current state of emergency in the Commonwealth due to the outbreak of the COVID-19 virus. For this meeting, HSAB is convening by video conference via Zoom app as posted on the town's website, identifying how the public may join. Participants may find information on the conduct of this meeting at that location. Each vote taken in this meeting will be conducted by a roll call vote. All right, so looking at the agenda, audio recording, adoption of the agenda. I'm going to make life easier, I'm going to ask one person to make motions and another person to second. So Lucy, I'm going to ask you to make a motion to adopt the agenda.
Okay, I make a motion.
And Jason, can you second that?
I second it.
All those in favor, Lucy, Jason, Angus?
Aye.
Aye.
Somebody else. And I'm an aye, so all that is. We've adopted the agenda. Hang on one second. All right. I think we can go down to the first item on our approval of minutes of June 21st. What? Yeah, oh, June 21st, okay. And June 28th. So Lucy, can I get a motion to adopt both of those minutes?
Motion to adopt.
And Jason, are you seconding that?
Yes, second.
Okay, all those in favor, Lucy, Jason, and Angus?
Aye.
Okay, and I'm an aye, so we've approved the minutes. And now we can go down to the agenda items. The first one will be, the first one listed on our published agenda is for 7 North Mill Street, but I'm pretty sure that was removed because they heard it Thursday, I guess, last Thursday. So next on the agenda is 2224 Easton Street, main house. Oh, I gotta bring that up. So I'll share my screen.
Mickey, I want to make sure that you have the most up to date because it's been quite a while since this has been heard, and yes, this looks right. This looks right.
Yeah, it's definitely different than the last time we saw it.
It's much different.
Yes. Yep. All right, I'm going to go down to the.
I don't know how HSAB works, whether or not you want me to say anything, or do I just sit here and listen?
Well, it's pretty informal. So if you have something you want to introduce, talk about, please go ahead.
Okay, great. I'll be quick. I won't take up too much time. But last time, obviously, HSAB had quite a few comments on this. So did the HDC. I tried to take all the comments to heart. We've made some pretty extensive revisions to this, starting with on the site plan, whereas before I had both garage structures right butted up against Easton Street. And it was suggested that I stagger those to sort of loosen up the street edge to not maintain sort of full vertical wall, even though they are 1 story and are down at grade because they don't need to be raised within the floodplain. Additionally, HTC and HSAB, I think both really encouraged and suggested that the front door be visible from the street. So now what is the guest house structure that's located on the north side of the site has been slid down to the east so that the curb cut will allow you to see the front door of the house from Easton Street. And you'll see in the back of this packet, there's quite a few renderings that I included. Additionally, I sort of broke what was a U-shaped structure before and made it more of an L-shaped structure. And now the studio is located to the western side of the site, disengaged from the main house. So additionally, the HTC suggested I actually, believe it or not, add more glass and make the main mass of the house taller. So that is what I did on the south side of the project. I've adjusted a bunch of the dormers, added quite a few covered porches based on looking at some historical precedent from the area, and tried to create, I think, a home that is more interesting than a lot of the existing homes along Easton Street from the water. I've spent a bit of time studying them. And I feel like this house has some nice additive massing components to it. It is varied. I also completely changed the trim detailing on it. It was suggested that the house before was too plain. And I've included some images in the back of this presentation of the trim structure where the larger overhangs, a bit more of almost a crown molding piece on the eaves and fascias that wrap around, a little more ornate on the head casings of the windows. And I feel like it's a better house now than it was before. So it is now breaking the 30-foot ridge height plane. So I will need to get that variance within the floodplain. But again, I was encouraged to do that to create a house that had a little more of a vertical presence on the main mass. But the secondary mass and the middle mass are below the 30 feet. So I'll leave it at that. Oh, and I had before had black sash windows, and HDC said no way to that. So now it is, I believe it's gray. They are gray sash windows with a lighter gray trim.
All right, thanks, Andrew. I'm gonna, I've looked at this ahead of time and I've got some thoughts. And Andrew, I'm gonna apologize ahead of time. You're not gonna like this, but
It's fine.
Here we go. This is sort of written down, so it's going to sound like I'm reading something. This design approach is disappointing. For such an important and prominent location, the design lacks any pleasing architectural style and character. Instead, it is a complicated collection of disorganized and competing boxes. The hierarchy is confusing as there is no clear main mass with subordinate additions. One section has been elevated to assume the main mass position, but it is of the same scale and proportion as the other side, resulting in competing wings. The main mass should be noticeably grander than the additive masses surrounding it. Some of the details, the doors are oversized at 7 feet 6 inches tall, detracting from the scale of the building. And the floor light design is confusing next to the 2/2 windows. Doors should look like doors and be of a more traditional size and pane proportions, such as 7 feet high with 12 or 15 lights. I'm going to scroll down to some elevations. Okay, can you all see those elevations that we're looking at now?
Yes, thanks, Mickey.
Got it. Okay, so the very visible chimney mass, and I'm referring to the one off of the, well, I guess it's on the west of the building, is in an incredibly awkward location. The east elevation of stepped parallel boxes reads as a monotonous 2-story wall with little character. The independent ridge of the stepped portion is too disconnected to count as additive massing and feels like its own building. The horizontal boards on the outdoor shower and porch skirt are not traditional. They should be vertical or paneled lattice. The second floor deck railing should be more traditional rather than stacked horizontal rails. The south-facing screened porch sits on the screened panel. The south-facing screened porch panels sit on the floor, confusing the scale of that section of the porch. They should sit on a traditional porch railing. And Andrew, I think I would just suggest that you look, for my taste, for Brant Point, at other examples in the area. And I know, Sand and Weed, it's a very old building. It's very classic. It's very charming looking building. And you probably are familiar with the building called Driftwood that used to be in this location. Another, very pleasing, attractive building that when you see it from a distance, it's it's got an architectural style to it. It's to me, this I think you said it earlier, maybe the HDC commented, this building to me is too simple. It's too plain and too just a collection of, you know, simple boxes. So personally, I'm looking for something with more style. So I'm going to turn this over to the rest of the board. Anybody else ready to talk about this one? Lucy, go ahead. You're muted.
Mickey, I agree with your comments. And Andrew, I realize that, you know, having to elevate new structures in the flood plan is an added challenge. And because they're going to be elevated, all these details are a lot more noticeable. And also, I completely agree with Mickey about the large chimney on the, is it the west side or east side, whatever, both chimneys. And were they to be regular brick or parged or painted or?
They're regular brick.
Okay, and then also you said something about the two different color grays. If those could be specified, that'd be great. And
They're on there somewhere, but on the cover, I think.
I mean, I do know of an example of a neighbor of mine in Quays who said it was gray, and I think there was a drop of black paint put in the can, so to speak. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Lucy. Jason or Angus? Jason?
I'll go. I'm gonna sound maybe confusing, but because I wasn't on this the first time, this is replacing. You've shown me the house that it's replacing, correct?
We haven't shown the house that it's replacing, unless you look at the.
It's in the images, right at the beginning. I just want to make sure I'm clear.
Yes, it's clouded in the images.
Okay,
There,
right.
that's probably it.
And those two houses are basically mirror images of one another, the one on the left and the one that's on the right. And while the one that exists is, I don't remember the date off the top of my head, but it's fairly modern. It doesn't completely fit in with what you would think about for Easton Street. I really feel like when these houses were designed and built, they were built to kind of blend and almost disappear. And they do kind of disappear. They've kind of, I would say, become somewhat iconic though, in the fact that they kind of do, just based on the way they look, the fact that they're mirror images. But I feel like that was the point of the house that exists right now. It was to kind of not take away from the rest of the neighborhood and the historic buildings that were on the street. And so I kind of feel like something that goes in, ideally I wouldn't want to see the house go away, but I think something that replaces it needs to kind of take that into account. And I think that the house that you've designed, while it might be nice somewhere else, I don't think it's appropriate for this place. I agree with what Mickey and Lucy have said about current design, but I feel like it's just completely overwhelming. And I realize it has to come up because of floodplain, but I just feel like it's not the right thing to be here. And I don't have anything more that I can really elaborate on that, and just more of my feeling about how a new structure should fit in to Easton Street, particularly here and so close to Brant Point, because it is something that everybody sees as they come and they go.
Thanks, Jason. Angus?
I agree with the comments that have been said so far. This feels more like a complex than a house on Brant Point. I think it's a good suggestion to look at the more historic houses on Brant Point to get more of a cue about massing and details and so forth. There really isn't anything with this that is, to me, is saying Nantucket or specifically Brant Point. So I again would look at the more traditional Brant Point examples of architecture here. Yeah, I could go into the specifics of everything, but it's more of a general feeling of the whole thing. It would be, you know, I think programmatically you could have this capacity and make it feel like a compound, but it feels more like a commercial complex rather than there being a main house with auxiliary structures or additive massing, making it feel that way. I'm disappointed to hear the HDC actually was asking for a rise in structure rather than a dropping of the of the substructures or additive massing. Anyway, those are pretty much my comments. Thanks.
You know, you bring up, Angus, you bring up the notion of the height, and you know, this is going to be a large building no matter how you dice it up. It's you know, it's a big program. There's going to be a lot of space. And personally, I'm not as concerned about the height up to a point, but more of the relationship of the tall parts of the building to the lower parts. You know, the height should be, the high part should, to me, should be central and feel like the main body of the house is, this is, you know, in a very typical, I'm not going to say colonial, but that's kind of true for that too. But any, you know, a lot of the old houses in the area, you have the big main mass, and then you have these subordinate masses coming off of it. And I'm not feeling that at all here. It's, you know, Andrew, I hope you're not feeling that we're saying this is an unattractive building. It's just.
No, I've got a tough skin, Mickey. I'm fine. I'm fine with it. The challenge is that with, you know, one of the challenges that HSAB says very different things than HDC says. That's just one challenge.
Mhm.
The other is that if I came in with a large ridge, which is what I originally wanted to do, like the house that used to be on the site, they would tell me that I can't have a ridge over 45 feet. And therefore, you now have a mass of a house that's trying to be a main mass, but actually isn't large enough to be impactful on the site and integrated in the needed program that we're going to have. So you end up with a catch-22. And I've been in front of HDC enough to know that they're going to say, you know, break the ridge up, drop things down, which is what we try to do here by breaking this into 3 pieces, right? So there's, so I'm confused by some of the folks saying there's not additive massing here, because this actually does have additive massing. And Mickey, you're saying it should have less additive massing and more of a primary mass. I also, you know, think that the grouping of buildings actually does create a compound feel with the garages. We very intentionally have the garages down at grade as you come off the street. The guest house is then the mid-height, and it sort of steps up as you work back into the site, which I think is the right thing to do. I've studied all of the homes along Easton Street, and there's actually 0 architectural style to any of them. I have every photo in this packet if you guys want to go through it. There's nothing about those homes that either says, I mean, none of them are original. There's maybe one that was left. The rest are just sort of big boxes. There's nothing to them. So if the goal is to create a big box, that's certainly something that can be done, but I'm not sure that would ever get approved. That's the challenge, right? Like I would do the big box with a few smaller pieces on it, like the big gambrel that used to be there, but that would never, ever, ever get approved by the HDC.
Well, you know, I don't, you know, I hear what you're saying, and I don't think we're really suggesting you to go for some big box, but I think just something with a little bit more continuity of the masses, and a little bit more a style. I don't know, just more
Decoration.
Appearance, just a little bit of a flair, maybe. I mean, this is a really prominent location. This is going to stand out big time.
Yep.
So you know, I'm hoping to be looking at a really attractive building from now on, you know, going forward. So, and this is, you know, what you've got here is not unattractive. It's just, as I said, it's kind of disappointing. I would love to see something a little bit more appealing there. So, and it's, you know, you're right. The HCC is looking at this probably a little different than we are.
Yep.
But
All right.
I think if you changed the program a little bit to where we, really started appealing to our comments.
Yep.
I think they're actually starting to listen to us these days. So
Yeah. They definitely are listening. They're definitely listening. Yeah. Okay.
so I think you
All
get
right.
the picture.
Back to the drawing board.
Okay, thanks a lot, Andrew.
All right. Thank you all. Bye.
Okay.
Oh, the next Mirka wants the landscape to be held with the, I don't know if you guys talk about that too, but
Well, I was going to say that's going to come up next, and I'm just going to say let's track it with the main house.
yeah. Okay.
Nikki, could I
Wait,
make a comment about the landscaping plans before she comes back?
Yeah, go ahead, Lucy.
I looked at those plans quite carefully, and there are a lot of things that aren't labeled or indicated. If she could do that before it comes back, it would save us a lot of time.
Will do. Sounds good.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Okay.
thanks, Lucy.
Thank you all.
Thanks, Andrew.
Bye.
We'll see you.
Yep. Bye.
Bye. All righty. Next one is Jim Icard. And I'm not seeing Matt McEachern here. This is at 1 Bloom Street. So I'm going to stop sharing. Oh, there's Matt. Sorry. Hi, Matt. Matt, you're coming up next.
Okay, thank you.
So I gotta share. I'm learning. I'm controlling this, so it's going to take some time to
No worries.
get up to speed. All right. Do you see? No, you don't. Share. Here we go. All right. You should see that on the screen by now.
Yes.
All right. Matt, I've got some comments about this one. Is there anything you want to say ahead of time?
Just that I think, made a lot of the changes that the board had requested. We tried to simplify the street facade on the east. We adjusted the stepping back, so it's like telegraphing, lower the plate height. These are mostly all on the east elevation. Just do this. Start the video so you can actually hear. So yeah, it was mostly on the east elevation. So the HTC reviewed this as well after this committee did, and there were some changes that we made. So basically, you can kind of see the previous HTC submission on the east elevation. We had those kind of 4 windows that were, smaller on the first floor. There was just something about that we didn't really love. So anyways, we dropped the plate height on the secondary additive mass to 1.5 stories, and just changed it to a single window, second floor and first, which I think really kind of cleans things up and makes it a little bit more subtle and understated. We also dropped the plate height of the on the left side of the east elevation as well. So just to kind of have it step back, and basically it just steps back a little bit by little bit. And I think that it works well. I think it doesn't overpower the house. I think it's very simple. The HTC also asked us if we could increase the size of the casing around the front door based on some historical information that historical photos that we had presented as part of the application. So I think the rest of the changes are, in the back of the building, we're just trying to clean it up. The west elevation is the rear of the building. We played around with the width of the shed dormer so that there was a direct correlation to the windows below, French doors below to the dormer and windows above. And just try to keep it fairly, simple, if you will. And then we did enclose that 1-story screen porch. Again, it's completely behind the 1-story addition. So anyways, with that, I look forward to the comments from the board, Mr. Chair. Thank you.
Hey, Matt. All right. So, looking at the east elevation where you started, under normal circumstances, in reality, this does look like an improvement to what you originally submitted. But, I've got some prepared comments that I'm just going to read. The proposed additions overwhelm the 1727 house and the simplistic character is lost. The additions are too complex, too tall, and too wide in relation to the main mass. The fenestration and roof lines do not relate to the original simple Quaker architectural style at all. This house has been around for almost 300 years and for the most part has maintained its simple character and form. It would be very unfortunate to permanently destroy that character after all these years. Old houses on Nantucket need to be respected and not obliterated beyond recognition in order to create an excessive amount of floor space. Please come back with a new approach that maintains the scale and character of the original house. So,
Can I just respond to a couple of those?
yeah,
Nikki?
please, thanks.
Okay, so I disagree completely.
Yeah.
And respectfully, of course. This main body of this structure is still intact. And I would submit to you that the vernacular of Nantucket is about additive massing. Structures were added to. And in fact, I think that's what defines the Nantucket vernacular, additive massing. If we could just stay on the east elevation, is that possible, just for the sake of discussion? So your characterization that this addition obliterates the existing structure, I think is inaccurate. And I just respectfully disagree. I think it's fairly dramatic language. I don't think it's true. Obliterating the existing structure would mean leveling it. To me, that's the definition of obliteration. Terms like grossly, gross amount of square footage. Again, these are, to me, I'm sorry, but they feel more like they're personal judgments about the ownership and less about the architectural value of the structure. Again, if we were completely demolishing the original structure, that would be a completely different story. But in this instance, we're doing additions to it. So I just wanted to clear that up if I could.
Okay, thanks, Matt. And I'm not, I hope you don't ever think that I'm saying anything as a personal affront to you or your clients. I used to know Jim Icard. He was a former client of mine. I respect him personally. So, it's nothing at all about the client or you. It's not a personal thing. I'm looking at the drawings. So to me, I think, yeah, they are strong words and I apologize for that. But I think that what's left of this building no longer feels like a house that was built in 1727. And and there aren't too many of those left. So many of them have already been altered beyond recognition. And I think that personally, I'd rather see most of the new work pushed well back so the main house really stands prominently, the original house, forward and maintains that integrity of that original main mass, and all the additive massing falls in the rear. But I'm going to move on to somebody else on the board. Anybody else ready? Angus?
Thank you. I have to agree with your comments, Mickey. Nothing is really proposed to the street side of the main mass except for the roof walk, which there is some documentation of a previous walk. What dramatically changes the facade is what surrounds it, and to either side of it. When you look at the, I guess it would be the south elevation, that gable end is so dramatically changed, where you once would see the whole gable exposed. Nearly all of it has been covered, and that's not going to be preserved. Certainly not in public view, but most likely in private view as well. And to the point of what the possibilities are for this edition of program, it's a relatively deep lot, and there's plenty of room to go back, as many of the downtown Nantucket houses do. They telescope back rather than out to the sides. because most of the lots are fairly narrow. And the side yard would be optimally the place for the recreation, for the yard, so forth, that that reinforces the existing historic structure that is unusual. Most of these houses have been tampered with to a degree that they're no longer really recognizable for what they once were. And this is an unusual house and circumstance. And I think that's why it's been on so many postcards, as just the charm of the existing structure. No doubt houses have been altered and added on to over the years. But this is one that hasn't. And so after 300 years, it would be great to, have another 100 years of the house resembling what it once did. And so I would strongly recommend taking the program and pushing it to the back rather than coming off the side. I appreciate the south addition getting brought back from the face. It was like a foot or 2 feet from the face before, which really created a wall, a monolith. But pushing it back helps. But what would really help is pushing it back beyond the original main mass. And I would get into more specifics, but I feel like that is really the biggest issue for me, is how much that changes something that's been the same for so long.
Thanks, Angus. Lucy?
Yeah, I thought that last time we reviewed this, that Matt, I thought you agreed that you were going to come back with a drawing of the original floor plan because of the age of the house.
Yeah, I thought we did that. If I didn't, I apologize, but I thought we did. But I can get that for you. I could probably get that emailed over to you if it wasn't part of the original submission.
It would have to be submitted through the office. You can't do it, I don't believe, to me.
Well, I could certainly do both, but I was just saying that if you're interested in it.
I think that because of the age of the house, I think that information is really important because it helps us to justify any architectural changes.
Sure. I'm just making a note right now.
It's also good to have that on record.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. So, I know you did ask for that, and I thought that we had submitted that, and if we didn't, I apologize, but we should have.
Okay, thank you. I look forward to seeing it.
Yeah, sure. We definitely have it, so.
Okay, thanks, Lucy. Jason?
I agree with everything that's been said. I would like to point out, based on the floor plan that is proposed, that means that I know we don't have any oversight over the interior, but that means the winder staircase in the front hallway is being ripped out. I have watched all of the plaster get ripped out. I have been in the neighborhood of this house for 36 years of my life, and this house has really not been touched. And I think, as both Mickey and particularly Angus said, the program, if there's going to be anything, needs to come off the rear of the house, because the facade, the front that faces Bloom Street, is iconic. It has remained untouched for an incredibly long period of time, with small little things done to it over time. But these additions dwarf and obliterate particularly the south side of the house. And 3 sides of this house are fully visible to Bloom Street. And it does not look like a 1700s house once these proposed additions are made to this house. And there are a few other structures in the neighborhood that have remained not completely untouched, but that still speak to the time in which they were built, such as the cooperage on Vestal Street, not including the jail or the Mariah Mitchell Association's Mitchell House. But I think this needs to really be completely rethought, because there is a large yard in the back that this could all extend out into and would be relatively invisible from Bloom Street. That's all I have to say.
Thanks, Jason. Yeah, I think you're getting the message that we really want to respect the front main mass of this building and put all the additive massing to the rear and not, I think it's possible. There is yard space. It just, when I look at these elevations, the south elevation, the massing of the additions and even the one up near the front and the one to the back, they just, nothing about them reads 1700s. I mean, even 1800s. They just don't have that old classic feel that you'd expect in a house of that age. They look like modern additions on an old house. So
I mean, there is a school of thought with, additions to, historically significant structures that, that there should be some delineation in the form of architectural detailing and or style that shows, where the original was versus the old. And so we could try to take that approach. But again, I mean, just being very direct and honest with everybody, I understand the age of the house and we're trying to keep a lot of the infrastructure in place. The stairs, unfortunately, they're dangerous. Very interesting architecturally. If it was a museum, they'd be roped off and you wouldn't be able to use them. But for the most part, we took the approach of trying not to alter the original portions of the structure and then do additions to it. This lot in particular is unique. I would just present to you that, most structures in the core district are narrower, and the original primary mass of the structure, the historic portion, would kind of sit within that, that frontage area, if you will. And there really would be no room to go side to side. In this instance, it is a wider lot, and there is some latitude to go to do an addition to the side. So we were proposing that. So, but anyways, I certainly will take all of your comments under advisement. We're going to be before the HDC hopefully tonight as well. I know that they'll read your comments before, kind of set the tone. So thanks for your comments, and we'll see what the board has to say and take it from there, but definitely get the message.
Nikki, can I say one thing?
yep, go ahead, Jason.
Matt is asking for this to remain a museum, but with the amount of program that you're proposing adding to this, the winder staircase do not need to be removed. You can put a different staircase in the back. That's all I have to say. Thank you.
Yeah, and it's an emotional thing to see an old 300-year-old house lose much of its defining character, and unfortunately for us, some of that defining character is inside, like this stairway. That's never coming back, and it's old house, definition of old house, those stairways, and once you remove them, they're all gone, and we just hate seeing that happening to these old houses, and well,
I don't disagree. I would say that in most cases, just for what it's worth, most cases we're able to keep all the staircases. Like I'd say for the handful of historic renovations that we've done over the years, in almost every case, we've been able to maintain the original staircase. Just in this instance, and we're kind of, we're doing it in retrospect and hindsight, but that stair was not going to be usable. And I wasn't implying that this structure should be a museum, although maybe it should have been, who knows, I don't know. But my point is that we really just don't want anybody using that stair. So we could certainly debate about whether or not we should have kept it and then add another stair somewhere else. There's a lot of different factors that go into these projects, and it was not we really did try to see if we could work within that, because I don't like to rip those out. So I don't want anyone on this board to think that I'm rip it out, don't care. I do care. In this instance, we had to make a call. Clearly, I don't think anyone on this board agrees with it, but we did think about it. We did consider all the options, and in the end, this is where we landed. So again, respect all of you and your opinions, and I will take it under advisement.
Matt, is that staircase already gone?
Yep. I'm fairly certain it is, yeah.
Well, I think there's a philosophical approach to working with old buildings. And one of them leans toward preservation, which means we'll do everything we can do to save some of these old artifacts, especially an old stairway. And I think that's what we would like to see is architects and designers to approach these old houses with that attitude, with preservation in mind, thinking, what can we do to make sure this house still maintains its quality and character that it's had for hundreds of years? So,
which I know we disagree on this one, and clearly this is an exception, but I will tell you that probably every structure that we've worked on that was in the core district, we did not remove the stairs, either the front stairs or the back service stairs. And so they were insanely unusable. And again, we can kind of go back in time and say, well, you should have kept it and maybe figured out a way to keep it, but then add a separate set of stairs. But again, given the implications in the program requirements, there's a lot of things that go into it that aren't always obvious. So
well, it's all about choices. Lucy, did you want to say something?
Yeah, I do want to say something. I own a house that's about the same vintage as the Mariah Mitchell house. And when I was working on this, oh, by the way, the house won the NPT award, 10 years ago. But when I was working, having worked on my house, my philosophy was that I was the guardian of this house, and any work that was done to change it should be reversible. For instance, the porch on the side of my house could be pulled off so the original structure would appear exactly as it had beforehand. Now, looking at this staircase that you considered dangerous, whatever, by today's standards, it is dangerous, but there are possibilities that could have been done. For instance, sealing it off or something like that. And I would say that there are staircases like that that are used in a number of the houses. But I think, Matt, part of your job that I see is to convince the owners that they should be very proud of owning an historic structure and maintaining these details. You can't get those back. And down the road, there are going to be fewer and fewer houses that have these details, and that they should be proud to be owners of houses that have maintained them.
And I would say we do. I'm generally not interested in historic gut jobs. I think this is a specific example where obviously you're disappointed, and I do appreciate that. But I would say that I do feel that way about these houses. In any instance, we can keep original interior trim work, general structural layout. I mean, I tell people that all the time. Like we don't want to go in and blow it all out. We want to stay within the structural framework. In this particular one, we did make a call, and I understand you disagree with it. So I don't disagree with anything that any of you said, for what it's worth.
Okay, thank you, Matt. I think you got the message there. Anybody else want to continue or move on? I guess one more.
I'd like to move on. I'm sick to my stomach that this interior that is priceless and precious and at the core of this national historic landmark and a significant, historically significant building, that was a choice. And for a professional to be working in a national historic landmark such as Nantucket, there has to be a sensitivity and a responsibility to be the caretaker of these structures. And it's up to us as professionals, I'm saying that as a preservation architect, is that you have to be firm with your clients about what is necessary to stay and how you can emphasize all the qualities that exist in these old houses, rather than changing the character so substantially.
Okay, enough said. Let's move on to Matt's next one, which is 37 Fair. Pull that up. 1 second. Screen share. All right. Still loading. I'd be happy to hear, Matt. I have less to say about this one.
Great. Yep. That was a rough one.
Sorry. Still, okay, here we go.
So basically what we've done here is the HDC had requested that we change the rear L cross cable to just follow the ridge line of the existing rear L. So just kind of simplified it. You can probably see it best on the north elevation. HEC also asked that we reduce the amount of fenestration on that first floor porch. So I think those are the major changes.
Okay, thanks, Matt. I'm going to again open this one up, and I think that that's an appropriate change. I like that ridge change. The thing that still bothers me a little bit about this is the bump up in the ridge.
Mm-hmm.
And I have a suggestion, and I don't normally like to get into the nitty design details because that's your job. But if you see this wing if you see my arrow that's outlined here in red.
Yep.
Matt, if you were to push that to the south a couple of feet so that it's not prominent on this elevation but recessed,
Mm-hmm.
And then put a break in the roof line, because that'll naturally happen if you just leave the eave where it is.
Yep.
To me, that would feel, because this elevation is more visible than the south elevation, just because it's more exposed. And to me, that would, even though the ridge will still bump up a little bit,
Mm-hmm.
I think it'll be less visible because it's in its own roof plane. It'll be separated from that sort of secondary ridge running from the front to back. Now, and you look at the site plan, and that actually might pull you a little further away from the setbacks. Looks like you're almost right on the 5-foot setback.
Yeah, we're pretty close to that corner.
Yeah, so
I could certainly look at that. I mean, we thought that the additional break on the face of the addition helped support the idea that it was like an additive piece, but the reality is pushing that in by a foot to make it flush wouldn't kill us. So
it's, yeah, you've pulled it, and I'm just saying push it, so you'll have the same result as a break in the wall.
Mhm.
So that's let's go to the south elevation, or the west, I guess. South. So that won't change a whole lot, just different. Oops.
right.
And then the west is probably here. So you don't really see, can't see that original ridge behind, but so anyway,
Yeah.
those were my only comments. I also maybe might still suggest that French door on the north, if I can find that, here we go, be broken up into a French door and side windows, because the side lights, it's just an expansive amount of French door rather than windows, which we prefer. So those are my comments. Anybody else? Angus, go ahead.
I agree that the parallels as opposed to the reverse gable is more successful in that north elevation. And I think to break it up makes sense, but what I think would even be, well, maybe as good or better than what is proposed in this drawing is that it's flush. And it's just a continuous gable that continues on back, and changing the shed on the south elevation in order to facilitate that bumping back. But ideally, this ridge wouldn't be any higher than the ridge that it's getting added onto. almost always this is, it just continues dropping as you get further away from the main mass. But I definitely think that this is a move in the right direction. It feels better than the original proposal. And another suggestion for the porch French doors is to just separate them too, to have, if you needed a couple of French doors, to have some sort of separation between them. I'm trying to think, I think there's a large porch on Pine Street, not far from here, maybe on the other side of Darling, that that has a couple of sets of French doors, but they're separate.
Great. Okay. So Mac, I mean, Angus, you're kind of saying you're still not pleased that the ridge bumps up and would like to see that pulled down because true, they almost always continue breaking down and down and down rather than going back up. So that would be a positive to try to somehow get rid of that increase.
Yeah, I don't think it's necessary.
Yeah. Okay, Jason or Lucy?
I agree. I don't, historically, that would not pop up like that in the back. It's very odd. Yeah, I'm disappointed in that little back L, because that little back L is, I keep using this word today, but it is iconic in the way that that's how they did those additions, and the loss of the chimney. I mean, I'm not in favor of this, but one thing that definitely has to happen is that roof line has to come down, at least be even. I prefer it to be lower than that middle piece, but it definitely has to be even with that middle piece.
Okay. Lucy, did you want to add to that at all? No, you're muted, but it looked like a no.
I agree with what's been said.
Okay, thank you. Okay, all right, I think we can move on from that one. Thanks, Pat. And you're still on, I guess.
Yep.
So
Just want to say that I really enjoy our time together.
I bet you do. I wish it could be more.
No,
Sorry, but
no, that's okay. I got it. That stare, I know that stare. I'm telling you, we really debated over it. I know I'm not going to convince anybody of anything, but
no, you're not.
nope. Well, I mean, in a situation like that, I mean, when I mean this sincerely, because like I'm not interested in, I don't like demoing historic things. I really don't, despite what you might think. But in a situation like that, I mean, is a preservation trust, can they buy the property, or what, is there any, because no matter, you know, it was, trust me, it's so old, but it's still being, it's a house that's on the market, you know, someone buys it. Even with the understanding that's a historic structure, staying within the confines. I just wonder if there's, in situations like that, are there venues where you could try to get the house purchased by a land bank type, you know, endowment?
Nobody's got the money for it.
Yeah.
Matt, that conversation comes up a lot. And,
Yeah.
you know, there's, who's going to buy a bunch of old houses? I mean, the NHA doesn't even want the properties because of the
Right.
maintenance. It's the
Right.
people have got to understand that they are buying something that is pretty much unique, that won't be available in the future. And they should take pride in that. If they don't want to live in an old house, go buy a house on, you know, Cisco or somewhere else.
I'm with you. And I would say that most of them, like I said, this particular owner, I think he knew, and we are, again, it's not to the extent that this board would prefer, but I wouldn't categorize this person as somebody who's incredibly careless and just wants a new house. They know that they're buying it, but there are some decisions we have to make. So anyways, but we can kind of move on, but I appreciate your comments.
Yeah.
Well, we can't ignore that for 300 years, this has been bought and sold and inhabited. And, you know, there might be a history of someone falling down the stair and dying, but I'm not aware of it. I don't think anyone else is. And yeah, I mean, these are treasures. It's like a 300-year-old tree. You're not going to grow it back once it's cut down.
Totally.
Next,
totally
people
get
to
that.
inhabit it can deal with the ghost.
Yes.
Great.
Okay,
Yes, let's move.
so
Now we're on, I want to just say
we
this.
got a really easy one coming up.
Yeah, 26 Bear, piece of cake.
Um, 26 easy.
Easy,
No
sorry.
pun, no pun
26
intended.
easy.
Can I ask you another question? This is just with new structures, I guess, because this is the Historic Structures Advisory Board. I get asked this question sometimes, is that if it's a new structure, it's not a historic structure. Does that, you know?
We cover
not
downtown.
really. It's context, I guess.
Yeah, it's the neighborhood that we're dealing with.
That's what I say. That's my answer. So, well, all right. So I'll just jump right into this one. I'll talk about the detail changes, and starting. Why don't we just look at the front of the building here? And on the east elevation, what we've done is I'm going to, like I said, massing changes first. We've obviously gotten rid of the Dutch hip, the roof owl, and essentially just tried to kind of clean up the geometries where we could, make it less ornate of a building. We've removed these on the south elevation. We've removed 2 decks, one of which was a balcony, which I know there wasn't a whole lot of support for that. So there's really just a single deck off the front of the building. I think that those were pretty significant concessions because it's obviously waterfront, but I understand that we were hearing both this board and the HTC. Probably a single deck on the front of the building was feasible, but not more than that. We are proposing to add a front stone and brick stoop similar to the one that's at 28 Easy Street. The hope is to actually connect the 2 structures so that there's a generally an elevated patio, if you will. It's kind of probably not the best word, but basically kind of continue that stretch across the facade of the building. And the reason being is there is a 1 in 20 ramp that is at 28 Easy Street that allows you to go up to an elevated area in front of the building. So it allows for flush thresholds. And if we connected the 2, then we would essentially be elevating kind of a secondary public space, if you will, connecting the 2 structures. So that's what the, you can kind of see the steps in the elevations and the site plan. So in general, what we try to do is just really simplify it based on the comments from the board. The one significant change, which I don't know if anyone's caught this, is that the building is shown as being brick. And that is purely a function of resiliency and coastal resiliency and durable building material on the coast. So with that, I look forward to the comments from the board. We can go from there.
Oh, I'm glad you mentioned that. I did not notice that.
Maybe I should have shut my mouth.
A brick building downtown. That's an interesting thing I got to think more about. So Matt, I have noticed that you've made some of these detailed changes, but I read through the HGC's minutes and everybody on the HGC said this building is too tall and too complex. And I don't see any changes or, in that regard, in the massing of this building. So, and then I'll just go on again. Sorry. This design is still too large and too complex for this location. The historical waterfront typically had simpler utilitarian buildings. This design is very similar to the one next door on Easy Street, which would create a new and inappropriate dominant style in that area. This building should contrast with that one to show that this is not the new norm on this street. Instead of both masses being at the same height, there should be a change. And I'm referring to this building now. There's 2 sort of there's a main mass and a wing. Instead of both masses being at the same height, there should be a change in the height and the massing to show a dominant style, to show a dominant main mass and a lower additive mass. Second floor balconies overlooking the street should not be allowed anywhere downtown. There is no historical precedent for one. It's still way too tall at 34.5 feet tall. The 3rd floor should be eliminated entirely. This is a corner lot and the height is very visible from the new park and the wider sidewalk down on Easy Street. This is all right. Sorry, Matt. This is yet another in a series of proposed projects that are attempting to supersize downtown Nantucket. We need to keep the existing scale of these buildings as is in order to retain the character of town. If we aren't vigilant, the town as we know it will change forever. So, Angus, go ahead.
Well, the last time we had this review and looking at what's proposed compared to what was previously submitted, I honestly prefer the older building just because the hipped gable sort of brought height down at the edges. And the reduction in balconies, I think is certainly welcome. But at first glance, looking at the fenestration and the utilization of 3 floors, you kind of have to look deeper to see, wait, what did change here? And in our last conversation, Matt, you had mentioned that you had to disagree about 3rd floor use downtown. And I've lived here over 40 years and driven through town and walked through town countless times over the years. And I thought, well, maybe I'm remembering it a different way. And so I really paid attention going down Water Street and up Main Street and down Federal Street and Center Street and Broad and India. And relatively, there are few 3rd floor spaces that are utilized. Gable ends might have windows, but there are very few dormers. And so pretty much from that 2nd story eave line, which there are many, there isn't development of those upper floors that's visible, at least from any public way. And so again, where our issue really was with the mass and the height and the development of the 3rd floor, and there really hasn't been any change to that. So I hope that will happen in the next iteration.
Yeah, that's an interesting comment. I guess, I think that is true. There's just the old buildings in town just didn't have 3rd floors. I mean, if they did, they were attics that were just barely used and dormered and off, less visible locations. But
I can find, photograph. I could bring in photographs, of that and historic ones as well, and of Easy Street, because there were some larger scaled structures. I don't know if I'm allowed to share my screen.
sure, I'll stop sharing mine.
And there's no doubt they exist, but they're more rare than prevalent.
Well, they're not in your face.
Yeah,
Oh,
and I think
like-
that's a concern with this one. It's a corner lot. It's really, really visible.
The corner of Water and India is one of those that just doesn't look right. And this is feeling like that.
Just want to point out there was a pretty varied, the structures in this area were, they were like simpler, if you will, but they weren't devoid of detail. So I think what I'll do is I'll bring in some historic photos of the area, and we'll go from there. So like I said, downtown, there is a need and a desire and a historic precedent for 3rd floor uses. So I think that does have some relevance, and I'm not going to say that this is one of our colleagues or clients at one point said something about affordable housing, but housing mixed use in the core district I think is a good thing. This is not something that's under this board's purview, but it does contribute to the success of a downtown area. And I do think that the integration of residences into these spaces allows you to do that. And I think that the way to do that is to get some level of square footage on those 3rd floors. Again, if there is historic precedent for it, I can bring photographs. Again, this is probably going to be something we're just not going to agree on. So, but anyways, again, always appreciate your comments and perspective.
Okay, I'll bring this back up again. Lucy, did you want to say anything?
Well, I do agree that the building is too tall. Last time this came before us, I submitted a photograph that sort of showed how massive it would have been on that corner. I'd also like to add that I'm not crazy about the brick.
Yeah, the brick is an interesting one, Matt. What a bold move there. I'm not sure I'm crazy about it either. Sure, certainly makes it stand out as different from the one next door. But I don't know. I have a hard time going with brick in this location. It's just
And brick with a balcony and the porch.
yeah.
And
Yep,
dormers.
I
It
think the
doesn't- it
primary
doesn't-
motivation was, again, long-term resiliency. But again, one of the reasons we're here is to get everyone's opinion and then make changes accordingly. So.
Right. Jason, anything?
No, just all those details that currently exist, which I don't agree with, would not lend themselves to a brick structure. A brick structure is, whether it's quote unquote resilient or not, is still going to flood. I agree with everything that's been said. It's too tall, it's too big, and it smacks you in the face as you come down the road, compared to the small kind of unassuming little building that's there now that was kind of reflective of the bathhouse that was across the street. That is no longer, but that's it.
Yeah, I think so much about this is calling attention to itself, not just the size, but the details and the use. I'd love to see, as I kind of said earlier, make it lower, story and a half, two stories, whatever. But some real additive massing. This is just two masses, of the same height, cross gabled.
Well, one thing I would say about that though is that the lot, again, downtown, the ground cover ratio is higher. I think that's by design. Most structures are kind of maxed out on their footprints because they are so small. And as you know, that makes for kind of a challenging solution in terms of creating massing. I personally think that, we showed a series of renderings at the beginning of this process, which I thought, I'm interested in making a structure that looks good and is contextual and fits. I'm not interested in building a building or designing one anyways that looks out of place. And so I generally thought, given all the parameters and everything that we, program wise, that, from an additive massing perspective, this from both views, being on a corner lot, it does have different expressions from both streets and presents itself well on the corner. So I'm not sure, what more we could do to vary it. But anyways, so with that, again,
I think that the scale and the size and the volume will go a long ways to making this a lot more acceptable. It's just too much.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
I suggest, again, we have the whole library of design downtown already. Look at the older structures that are downtown. Look at the corner structures, the multi-use structures that have the commercial space below. And on the second floor is the residential use. And the third floor is generally attic space. And if it's used, it's kind of, invisible to the public. But between what's existing and the historic photos that you're talking about using, draw on those for inspiration, and I'm sure you'll come up with something that looks appropriate.
All right.
Okay.
Anybody?
I just noticed, Mickey, on the drawings, it looks like the third floor dormers has clapboard on it too, versus the brick.
Yeah, probably. You can't brick
Okay.
a dormer.
Yeah, but I'm just saying that, well, the other dormers are bricked.
They really shouldn't be.
The two,
I think I'll look at that, but the dormers should not be, they're not brick.
Yes, it's a little confusing, clapboard lines and brick lines, but
Yeah.
I
they're
think
not-
the gables are brick, but the
Yeah,
dormers
the
are.
the gables are brick, but the dormers themselves are
That's what I meant.
wood frame and clapboard, yeah.
okay.
They are.
Thanks.
All right,
Yeah, thanks, Matt.
all right. Good to see you all.
You too.
Oh, we should do this again soon sometime.
I would love to see all of you outside of this venue at some point,
I agree.
for a glass of tea or something. So, all
Good.
right. Thank you.
All right. See you later. I think that might be it on the agenda. Yes. All right, so it comes down to motion to approve the comments for the agenda items.
So
Lucy,
moved.
Yes,
yeah, I'm gonna go with Lucy and Jason again on this one. It's easier for Kadeem when he writes up the minutes to stick to them all the same, so. Motion by Lucy, Jason seconded that.
Yes, I did.
Thank you. All those in favor?
I,
Hey,
Aye. And a motion to adjourn.
yes,
Seconded
I'll
by,
second that.
thank you. All in favor?
I.
hi.
All right, I'm in favor. Thanks, guys. We'll see you soon.
Thanks,
Bye.
Vicky. Jason, thank you for coming for the whole meeting. And as always, thank you, Lucy.
I'll show you my face now. Oh, nope, I got my tape over.
There you are.
I'm sorry. I couldn't, I didn't want to cry in front of Bloom Street, so.